Greetings and peace, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Tonight, after a while, I have the honor and privilege of being joined by my brother and comrade of the NOR-FSO, Brother Matt Douglas, who returns to talk about current events, including the recent border skirmishes between Thailand and Cambodia. So, without further ado, Noor alaikum, Brother Matt, the stage is yours.
Alaikum Noor Salman, thanks a lot. Just a heads up, um, this is kind of like a take two because uh, we got cut off in our last one, and it's no smoking gun, but am I, am I a little suspicious? Sure. But, let the audience take that as they will. Um, but yeah, okay, and this is something that isn't getting a lot of airplay, perhaps no airplay, um, in Western media. And understandably, there are much bigger things going on, especially what's going on, in LA and the nationwide reaction to it, in the US. And of course, we still have the massacre of the Gazans by Israel, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, there's plenty of, there is plenty of stuff to cover going on in the world. And, things are a mess. But I do want to highlight one other thing that seems to not be getting airplay, but that I think does need some. And that is a incident that that occurred a couple weeks ago along the border of Thailand and Cambodia that has that claimed one soldier's life and has led to escalating tensions. And what I'm going to lay out right now, I'm going to just go ahead and say what I'm very suspicious of, which is that the West is, some Western power, most likely the U.S., but it could be the U.K., France, maybe even Israel, um, or a combination of all of them. Just like the corporatocracy that is ultimately behind this incident and rising tensions. Over to you.
Yes, Brother Matt, definitely. And we see that throughout history, especially with the Five Eyes Nation, and even what Brother Stephen Bear pointed out in the last podcast, is that they're always up to something to cause interference into the East, into the Muslim world, the global South, to make sure that these people are not prospering, fighting against each other, and then they come in and take the spoils. And I think with this scenario, we're kind of seeing the same situation taking place. And yeah, you're right. I mean, people have to rise up against this corporatocracy and just come together against the Western world, as we see with the Israel situation, that they're not holding them accountable, right? The laws and the systems are made for their benefit and by them and not for the benefit of all mankind. So, yeah, please continue.
Well, yeah, there's definitely some talk about um, going to, getting this resolved by the ICJ, which I'll get into later on in the podcast. But in general, I think that's a bad idea for both Thailand and Cambodia because it's ultimately a Western institution, despite its claims to universality. And frankly, if you're having a problem with your neighbor, don't go to the landlord that's known to evict tenants. But to flesh out what exactly happened on May 28th. Now, the incident that I'm going to talk about is on May 20th, but I got to go back historically a little bit to set the stage. Um, there's been a dispute along where the Thai-Cambodia border actually lies for about 80 years, when shortly before the French stopped occupying Cambodia, they drew, a map of, their, of, the Cambodian borders, and Thailand, that was never colonized, did the same amongst themselves right about the same time, but they used a different scale. So when you then try to, I forget which is which, but they used a different scale, and so when you then try to put that scale onto the real world, it comes out just a wee bit different. Okay. However, with the exception of one temple, um, on the border in Thailand's Ubon Ratchathani province, um, as far as I know, there's no other buildings or farms or houses or anything like that, because it is small enough area that it's not like there's gonna be much there. Um, but nonetheless, in 80 years, Thailand and Cambodia have not been able to hash this out and just put an end to it. Now, what happened on May the 28th was that, okay, because you have some, patrols along both sides of the border, not because there's normally tensions, they've been at peace for a while. The last time there was a skirmish and some saber rattling was, I want to say, 15 to 20 years ago. But it's been very peaceful since. But apparently, a Thai patrol and a Cambodian patrol got into a firefight for about 10 minutes before higher ups on both sides, called for a ceasefire, telling them, chill out, back off. It's a very suspicious incident to me, because now the incident itself is suspicious because it resulted in the death of one Cambodian soldier, but we haven't heard anything about any of the other soldiers involved on either side. It would seem, because of the lack thereof, that this one death was it. There are no even injuries reported on either side other than this one death. And both sides are swearing up and down that the other side shot first. And to me, that screams the possibility that neither side did fire first, but a concealed sniper did. And that could open the door up to any number of third parties having instigated this. Checking to make sure we're still live.
And my suspicion goes to the Israelis, because the Israelis, I've heard recently, their tourists were causing a lot of issues in Thailand as well, and in different parts of the Asian continent.
That is a possibility. Although Israel is kind of part of the whole Western apparatus, although they do act independently. So I think they are suspect, but I do think it probably goes even further than that. Because it's definitely the kind of thing that, just like with Palestine, that the West won't tell them to back off. So let me flesh out the scene a little more. Now, as just because we haven't talked about this, yes, there is some tension among locals with Israeli tourists in groups. Now, this is not to say you can't have group tours from a country. In fact, Chinese tourists to Thailand do it very often, have, just very scheduled, routinized package tours, that sort of thing. But this isn't really that. This is more just especially in the town of Pai, which is, but this stuff is very far from the areas that are notorious for um, Israelis acting up in Thailand. The main one of which is, like I said, the town of Pai, which is in Mae Hong Son province in the north, about maybe 3 hours drive, although it's a curvy drive through the hills from Chiang Mai, which is the largest city in northern Thailand. And basically, what's happening up in Pai is you have basically areas where, I mean, there are some kind of Israelis who come and kind of stay here permanently, but they're creating during certain seasons basically a whole town, not the whole town, but like a chunk of the town, more than probably just a neighborhood, where they're like running their own businesses to cater to these other Israeli tourists, some of which is illegal under Thai law, because Thailand has such a large tourist economy that they protect certain jobs um, for Thai citizens only. And getting citizenship if you're not, you know, an ethnic Thai or born here. If you're born here, you're Thai regardless of where you come from. If you go through the school system and all that, but it's very hard to get because they want certain professions protected, such as, say, taxi drivers. But what's happening in Pai is that Israelis are providing their own taxi service exclusively for other Israelis, thus, cutting in to the local business. So that's what's happening there. There was also a Israeli who got busted running like a tour guide service. I believe it was down in Pangnan province, which is like just north of Phuket. So yeah, these incidents are occurring, and it does very much fit, a colonizer mentality as the state of Israel is itself. It's just on a small enough scale that they can't quite take over at this point, but you can clearly see the entitled mentality.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's you have all of these different people. Some of them are just operating as spooks within Thailand, whether it's British, American, the Israelis, right? The same apparatus. So they're there to do what they're doing. I mean, I've seen that in my own home country of Pakistan with the Raymond Davis case, where you had the CIA operative who's being shielded by the local U.S. embassy, and he was caught in public doing what he was doing, causing a ruckus and disorder in the country. So yeah, these people are out there in all parts of the world to serve their imperial and colonial agendas, and Thailand is no exception to that with this border skirmish. Because if the brown people are killing each other, who benefits from that?
Exactly. Let me flesh out the scene a little more too. Um, Also, as we already did a podcast on this, but I'll flesh it out that in the October 7th attacks, not only were some Thai migrant workers in occupied Palestine gunned down, but some hostages were taken. And you can just put a link up to our other podcast that we did about a year and a half ago, about a month after October 7th, where I lay out that, okay, it makes no sense whatsoever for any Palestinian group, Hamas or otherwise, to take Thai hostages. The Palestinians have no beef with Thailand, but
And
we
that's
know,
that's a great point because brother Matt did discuss this over a year ago on this podcast. So what I'll do is in the description below I'll make sure I link to that. So please listen to that as well.
yeah, and I called it out like this, but Israel is so known for playing the victim on the world stage that it would fit right into their playbook for if you know to capture some ties and blame it on whether it be Hamas or whatever other Palestinian group. Right now, it's Hamas that's getting the finger pointed at them. But it doesn't. It would indicate not only that this operation went on, but potentially, and other people have said the same thing, although for wildly different reasons, that um, it was in fact Israel, perhaps Mossad, or whoever else that actually carried out October 7th, not Hamas or any other Palestinian force. And now Thailand tries to be really neutral and stuff like this, but they do recognize Palestinian statehood. And, they still have some trade deals with Israel and everything, but they, have not gone to the point of rejecting Palestinian statehood or any other sort of endorsement of Israel in this what's called a conflict, but let's face it, that's even war isn't the right term; it's a massacre. So the fact that Israel likely failed to sway Thailand to their side probably is a bit of a sting to their ego. Recent developments, additionally, that I will mention are that just recent, because about half the hostages were released, maybe about 2 or 3 months, roughly. I'd have to look up the date. After October 7th, when they were taken. Then the last wave of release was over a year later, and it was ironically about a week, maybe less, after Thailand had signed some small trade agreement with Israel. And when you consider how much bombing Gaza endured and didn't supposedly give up these Thai hostages, but about a week after this small trade deal was inked, the rest of them are coming home. Well, we can't prove it, but you got to scratch your head. And just recently, within the past couple of days, the last body of a hostage was returned. And apparently, and again, this story as it's being told is highly suspect, that the some Israeli offense force commandos tortured some Palestinians into revealing the location of the body of this last Thai hostage. Now, I find that highly suspicious. Not suspicious that the IOF would torture anybody, but from a tactical standpoint, of all the things you could try to torture out of people, are you going to torture out of them the location of a body? And then supposedly they sent in an elite unit to go retrieve it? That's I'm sorry, but I'm just not buying it. I'm not there, you're not there, we can't prove it, but I'm sorry, you got to scratch your head about this.
Yeah, yeah, that's how it is. And isn't that the Israeli motto? By deception, thou shalt do war. But at the same
Yep.
time, brother Matt, I'm actually kind of amazed at the younger generation now. Like looking at the comments on social media, on YouTube and TikTok. I think all of the years of brainwashing for us to feel bad for the Israeli, it's not working anymore, and I'm kind of happy about that. That despite all of the suppression, history revision, not showing all sides of the story, et cetera, now the younger ones are like, they know, they have the awareness and they're awakened. So I think Israel's on a ticking time clock, just like the U.S. and the Five Eyes Nation are, that their deception and supremacy is over. And this includes them trying to cause a skirmish between Thailand and Cambodia, which the leaders of both sides were smart enough to see through it and were able to stabilize it.
Yeah, well, they've got it stabilized. Saber rattling still going on, so it's not over. And I do want to flesh that picture out a whole lot more, because even though what I'm telling you definitely points to some uh, Israeli um, machinations here, and you can also link an additional video I did. It's only 10 minutes, where I'm suspicious that a um, guy who used to live on the same hall of the condo building I live in may have been a covert Mossad agent. Basically, because he was pretending to actually be really pro-Palestinian, but in a very unhinged way. So, I did a quick 10-minute video about that myself. You can also link it in the description. Um,
Yes, definitely.
and I just put it out, and I just because it's funny because I just put out my thoughts, and I've actually like consulted with AIs and things, which I know, it's always questionable. They can't be definitive, but they are good to work with. And surprisingly, although I was kind of, and maybe not, even the AI was like, this sounds almost like a dead ringer for a Mossad operative. So take what you will of that. Um, But now, were they actually targeting me to see how I'd react? Well, kind of funny because I'm not anywhere near, any, hotspot of, group Israeli tourism in Thailand. So, yeah, it's a head scratcher. Um, but going on to, because Israel is just a satellite of the West, okay, and their imperialism. And these things go a lot deeper. Um, like I said, this skirmish on the border happened on May the 28th. What is just a huge coincidence, in quotes, here is that on May the 27th was the annual ASEAN summit. ASEAN kind of, Alliance of Southeast Asian Nations. Now, just to give you a little history, the founding of it was kind of CIA manipulated, hoping to play Southeast Asia off against China. This happened, I want to say this was back around like 1980 or so. It was originally only 3 countries. Thailand was one of them. I think it was the Philippines and Malaysia were the other 2. Could be wrong on that. But long story short, it kind of got away from the CIA and just ended up being its own thing of, the Southeast Asian nations actually forming an alliance with each other that includes, all 10 Southeast Asian nations now: Thailand, Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos, Vietnam, Philippines, um, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, and Brunei. So, and kind of like BRICS, the chairman country rotates every year, and this year it's Malaysia. And at this particular summit, that I think was like their main annual one, or at least was a big one, in Kuala Lumpur on May the 27th, they invited China and Chinese leadership. I think it was the foreign minister who was like the representative. I don't think Xi himself went. But and several higher ups from the Gulf Arab states. So it was ASEAN wanting to work with both, but no Western countries were invited at all. So it was ASEAN reaching out to other Asian powers, wanting to um, create ties within Asia, especially. Um, the summit had probably been planned for a long time before, but it happened to be very well timed, because one of the big subjects was working together and with each other to uh, find other markets in um, so that their business wasn't hurt with what had been U.S. exports because of the total bullshit tariff war that Dump was creating. So the fact that this incident on the border occurred, one day after that, where you see pictures of all, you do see pictures of all leaders from the Southeast Asian nation, from ASEAN, as well as high up representatives from China and the Gulf states, all kind of standing together. They look happy, the whole bit. Um, and this incident occurs one day later, and I mean, it's not proof, but you got to at least be considering the possibility that someone is trying to manipulate this. And with the way the skirmish occurred, yeah, all it takes is one well-concealed sniper, which could really be from any nationality, could be a hired gun. You don't know. So I think that is in and of itself highly suspicious. But what has, and I'll get into this in a little bit after I pause and give it over to you for a bit, is just what is played out online, in terms of saber rattling.
Yeah, I think you're right on the money there. And what we see now is a shift in a global economic policy where you have the leaders and think tanks of many of the global South and the African nations and the Eastern nations. Now they're recognizing the West for what it is, and I see them putting together their own economic policies, their groups, their think tanks, and they're shifting away from what we know as the Western powers. And now, in a surprise move, even mainstream media and podcast hosts and pundits who basically were refusing to denounce Israel are now denouncing Israel because now it's not seen as important on the world stage. Now it's seen as a pariah, which everyone is condemning, especially the younger generation. So their days are numbered. They can do what they want. It's like what it says in the Quran, they plan, but Allah is the best of all planners. And that's exactly what is occurring here in this scenario, is that England is a dying power, the City of London Corporation. America is dying, right? People are barely surviving here. Now, the other parts of the world are now having a higher quality of life, medical, dental, access to a merit based society where people are not in a toxic environment. They're healthier, live longer, have access to basic needs and necessities. So now I think the Western Empire is just like a rabid animal cornered, right? And it's trying to bite as many people as it can, while animal control puts it in a cage.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. And when you say it is rabid, I mean I'm definitely seeing that, because if you look at when I look on social media and what my friends are saying about it, most of them, okay, most of my Thai friends aren't saying anything. The few Cambodian friends I have from a trip there I took 6 years ago, I haven't seen them say anything yet. Although it's been a good 12 hours since I checked my feed for them. Um, so I'm not saying something couldn't have been added, but I'm not seeing anything from them. And what little I'm seeing from Thai people who I actually know is not saber rattling. They might the closest it gets to that is quoting the Thai national anthem, which there's a line from it, which roughly translated into English means "We want peace and love, but we're not scared of war if you bring it to us." Um, which is pretty much a normal human response to conflict, you know. Um, but Thailand wasn't colonized, and they're proud of it. Uh, so that's about the worst that it gets. There's a lot of, because the prime ministers right now of both Thailand and Cambodia are children of former prime ministers, Thaksin Shinawatra and Hun Sen, who were like old buddies. So there's definitely some skepticism that the two of them, from the Thai side, they're saying it's mainly a Cambodian issue that Thaksin is helping on. It could be equally true in reverse, because Thaksin's daughter Patangtan is not that popular either right now. Um, so, but basically, like, they're letting this happen, because it's boosting this patriotic fervor on both sides and distracting from the fact that both their kids who are now in the prime ministership aren't having the greatest approval rating. At the same time, though, while I think there is truth to this, I don't think you can dismiss it as the whole picture, simply because, as I've already stated, this is an incident that goes back 80 years. So, and when I see that, okay, it seems to me like the Thai people I know want peace, the Cambodians that I know seem to want peace. Why is it that this has never been able to be resolved? I mean, like, with the exception, like I said, of one temple, there's not really anything significant along this disputed area. So it should be a pretty easy task of, like, okay, let's just divvy it up, trade off, that sort of thing. It would seem to be pretty easy. But it hasn't happened in 80 years, and that's when you got to start asking why. And the obvious question, the Occam's razor answer is that someone is benefiting from it not happening and is sabotaging the peace process.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think we are seeing what's happening right now and how it's basically affecting the current climate. I mean, the U.S. itself is imploding into a civil war type scenario, and many people here are actually worried about the days to come. And it's all impacting all over the world now, which goes to show, how do you see the next 5 years going per se in terms of the situation that's happening now? How do you see the American situation playing out? How do you see Gaza playing out? How do you see, will you see more Americans and Europeans trying to go to other countries? Like, how do you see all of this playing out, the current
Well,
climate?
let me finish up on what I'm going to say about this border conflict, and I'll get into that, and even then, I'll only kind of touch on it, not because, I'm trying to be short. I mean, already we're going over, a half an hour pretty much focused on one incident, but there's so much history behind it.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I mean, the questions each question you're asking me could be a podcast in itself, but I will try and at least say something answering all those. But
Yeah,
I do
please.
want to flesh out the scene just a wee bit more in terms of just a little bit on just the overall historical perspective, as well as what I'm seeing, here. Um, like I said, as near as I can tell, Thais and Cambodians both want peace. They might have some nationalistic sentiment that they get a little more of the disputed territory than the rest, but it's not particularly important stuff for the most part. Okay, it's not too hard to work out a compromise, and you know, oh, where was I? Blah, blah, blah. But yet it's not happening now. One country that the finger is getting pointed at for inciting this is China, and I think that's horseshit. Um, I don't carry a flag for China. I think they do have their criticisms, but I I can easily be mistaken for someone who is, simply because the Western countries, especially the U.S., spew just so much total bullshit about them that it has to be countered. The thing is, though, China's big project with Southeast Asia is one of their subsections of the Belt and Road Initiative. Okay, and I'm sorry, but you don't want to build railroads through a war zone. So I can't I can't see how China is the culprit here. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit their MO. Regardless of whatever else someone else may think, it just doesn't fit. Sorry. Um, as for the BRI, for the most part, I think it's a decent idea simply on the green level because high, it's basically high speed rail. Um, rail is Rail consumes a heck of a lot less fuel, even to the point of a factor of 10 from trucks. Now that might be upped a little bit with it being high speed and probably needs more power, but it's still a lot greener. Railroads probably, can go through territories with less needing to be cleared than for a standard road, the whole bit. So, it is green, and how it actually that will this development benefit the people or just corporations? Well, that depends on the individual policy of each country. And certainly there are, because China has somewhat gone capitalist, sure, there have been some Chinese capitalists, even in Thailand, who have done some very shady stuff, but that's not China, that's capitalists who happen to be Chinese. But nonetheless, the West is taking every opportunity to point the finger at China over whatever they can. Because there was, during the earthquake that was epicentered in Myanmar, one Thai building under construction collapsed with the better part of 100 workers in it, all just killed, buried in the rubble. And yes, it was a Thai, Chinese, and Italian collaboration. Funny how they never mention Italy much and pointing any fingers there. But obviously it's pretty clear that some safety codes were cut. But to Thailand's credit, they've already arrested the people that they, like the higher ups that they know did the code cutting and things. One of whom's even an old guy, but they've arrested him and are holding him without bail until trial. Which, let's face it, if this were America, that wouldn't be happening. You might not even get charged, rather fined. And never, and someone like that would never see the inside of a jail cell. So, it's still not a perfect situation. But on the Thai side, the justice does go, probably a little more to the rich than it does in the U.S., in terms of them actually paying for crimes. On the Chinese side, okay, yeah, there were some Chinese capitalists here who are probably also gonna have the hammer swung on them if they're still in Thailand. I might have already had it swung. I'm not sure. I'm not sure of that particular details on the arrests. But yet there are buildings all over China, and even significant numbers of joint Thai-Chinese construction in Thailand that are still standing, just fine. Easily 99% of these, joint ventures. Yet nonetheless, it doesn't stop people, especially Westerners, from coming on to social media and saying, "Oh, just cheap Chinese shit." So that that is a big factor that needs to be considered. But on social media itself, as I said, the Thai people and the Cambodian people that I know in person want peace. Yet on social media, there is all kinds of saber rattling on both sides, because I'm an American in Thailand. So English language articles from Thai sources wind up on my feed pretty much inevitably. And, if it's a source that I've actually signed up to because I know they're fairly neutral, great. But most of the ones that come across your feed without looking for are usually Western mouthpiece types. But even then, what you're seeing is both a lot of people claiming to be Thai or to be Cambodian going on there and saber rattling. And it just, you can understand a little bit, but the level to which this has occurred tells me that either these are fake accounts or someone's getting paid to say this, etc. And I've even busted two that were obvious fakes. One of which, the profile, this particular profile just uses a cartoon image for their current profile pic. But if you scale down, there's supposedly the real person if it's not a fake picture. And this person did have Asian features, but their biographical data says that they are, an American citizen born and raised there. And even on their cover photo, they have a flagpole showing not only an American flag, but a Marine Corps flag. And this person was going on there saying things, pretending to be Thai, or at least Thai ancestral, saying that, the Thai workers built it, so, and therefore nowadays both Thailand and Cambodia should live under the Thai monarchy. Which, needless to say, got some Cambodians ticked off. But the thing is, not only was this guy obviously an American citizen, regardless of his pedigree, if the picture was even real, but when I scaled down on this guy's page, it's talked about him getting some job that was either in Cambodia or Cambodia adjacent. So here's like an American who, if of Asian descent, is more likely of Cambodian descent, coming on and pretending to be Thai in a way to piss off Cambodians.
And yeah, the Marine Corps flag kind of gives it away that he's a U.S. military spook.
Yep. And I've had another one, because just for the audience listening, you and me were discussing this just on our own the other day. Since then, another one has come up, this time from someone claiming to be Cambodian. And interestingly, what started to come across my feed, I don't know if this is algorithmic, because I might often type the words both Thailand and Cambodia in comments when, these sort of articles come up. But also, I'm now getting English articles coming onto my feed from Phnom Penh News. And I'm seeing the same thing from these English language Cambodian sources. And on one of them, there's a guy claiming to be Cambodian. But I'm very suspicious that, first of all, he was trying to say that the Thai government teaches its citizens in their schools to hate Cambodians. And I called this out and very directly said, you sound like a spook. Because, I did teach English, in some Thai schools briefly, for what was collected between two schools was collectively about a year. And in the one I taught for the longer part of that, I let them first day kind of like, because first day, and keep in mind, I'm teaching just, twice a week, no, once a week. Let's see, I'm confused because no, for this particular school, twice a week. But it was a total of 8 classes that had maybe, 30 to 40 students each in them. So we're talking over 200 students. And I'm like, okay, because I'm not the kind of person who wants anyone kissing my ass. And so I said, okay, look, here's what I want you to do. I want you to tell me everything you don't like about learning English and everything you don't like about school. and I even had some saying, well, can we criticize the Thai school system? I'm like, okay, that's under the header. Go ahead. Um, Long story short, I never heard anyone saying that. And out of 200 students, I think I would have heard something. I mean, this was an area that was politically aligned against the then prime minister. So there was all kinds of talk, you know, critical in that direction. Yet I didn't hear, but if either A, they didn't like Cambodians, or B, were pissed off at their government for, teaching them this, I think I would have heard something from that many students. Didn't hear a peep. Not to mention that particular school had a couple murals, painted on the wall. When I say murals, I do mean painted on, the wall of the hallway, talking about ASEAN and ASEAN unity and the importance of that. So this guy, so I went and right back. It's like, yo, that ain't my experience. And he even tried to say that, well, some, these Thais shared it with me because they have been, gotten better education, often at Western institutions or something along that line. Either way, he was saying that he was trying to say that what got Thais out of their hatred of the Cambodians was the West. So naming the culprit as the savior is just all kinds of screwed up. But where I really think this particular person was not a Cambodian, but a Western opposing as one is, and I hadn't even gone into what the kids told me, so to speak, but saying, well, they wouldn't have said that to a quote unquote white guy. And that to me was just a total red flag because, okay, if, they'll call in Thailand, for example, they call a white guy a farang, which it literally translates as foreigner, but it's used to mean Caucasian. It's basically the equivalent of gringo. And if they're going to not use a Thai term, they'll just translate it as foreigner or Westerner, but they won't say white guy. Okay, in Thailand. And looking around I haven't been able to talk to my Cambodian friends about this yet, but searching online and consulting AI, they say there's a similar word in Cambodian, barang, that they tend to use, or also they would default to, most likely, if using the English term, would default to foreigner or Westerner as well. And so the fact that this guy used the term white guy, which would be used, that's far more American, which, said by both minorities pejoratively or just casual conversation among pretty much anyone. So here's first I had someone pretending to be a Thai dissing Cambodia. Now I see someone who very likely is pretending to be a Cambodian dissing Thailand, both of whom aren't making any sense. And these are just the ones that slip up. So I got to be suspicious of just about anybody else on there. And there's probably hundreds or thousands, not that I'm seeing all this many, but there's got to be thousands of commenters on all these articles. And, I got to be suspicious that that anyone who's basically saber rattling may be a plant, and likely a lot of them are. So this definitely seems to be some very large scale, online psyop kind of campaign.
Yeah,
But yet,
I think so too. Because I mean, it's like what Marshall McLuhan said, that World War III is not a physical war, but it's actually an information war and spiritual war. So now with the age of
oh,
AI
true,
and
but
the
true.
internet,
I agree. There's some truth to that, but that's not to say it can't devolve into a hot war, and even in the information war, due to the economics of it, a lot of innocent people still die. So I don't want to downscale the danger. in
Yeah,
any
but I,
way. And
you
I
know,
think that's really
as I
naive.
was finishing my point here is
Okay,
that
sorry.
yeah, you know, the thing is that that's why these spooks operate online is because they're trying to fight that propaganda and information warfare, psychological warfare, and the online and these different social media platforms are a part of that. And it's interesting you point out the word farang because in the British Raj, which is now India and Pakistan, now in the modern times, the British Raj they used the word Farangi to describe the foreigners that were there, whether it was the Portuguese, right, or the British, and anyone that was in India at that time. So that I found that interesting that
Yeah,
synchronicity you pointed out.
well, it's also there's debates about the word because I know from my experience around Persians that Farangi is also basically their word for foreigner, although I don't hear them using it commonly the way the Thais use Farang.
Yeah, yeah,
There's also because in Thai the way they say France is Farangse, and that's mainly because Thai the Thai language say compared to English, it doesn't between the two languages, they probably have about the same number of unique sounds, but English is wider and Thai is denser. And so they don't necessarily have a lot of the consonant blends that we do in English, and they'll get broken up. So, like, instead of saying, instead of if like someone I knew who liked to use as just like a online name, what would basically be sweetie, it comes to, it gets turned into sawiti, okay, because they don't put the SW together. So similarly, France was broken down into Faransé in a similar process. Um, but again, so there's multiple ways, but there is, yeah, what you're picking up on is that word is common in a lot of languages, it seems. So yeah, um, totally there with you on that. But what it also says is like, you would think that the English language media in both Thailand and Cambodia would be relatively minor, and yet okay, the fact that the powers that be are very obviously using it for some kind of psyop means that there's something more significant about it than what we would think it would be. So, they're obviously getting scared when, me and others come on um, countering the narrative. And yet, I've also, in this process, because not everybody, okay, and there is saber rattling spook, there are genuine people on both sides. And I've had perfectly reasonable conversations with both Thais and Cambodians on this matter. And when I say, well, look, I'm kind of suspicious, and I start laying out just kind of, okay, facts, and here are these strange coincidences, they're like, people on both, both Thais and Cambodians, who I think are the real ones on there saying, that makes sense. It's a good point. Um, so which to me just reinforces that the ones who are doing the saber rattling are spooks. At least a lot of them. I mean, some of them likely some of them are going to be suckers who picked up on the spook propaganda and didn't think about it much. But I mean, you got to question though that the percentages are a lot are if I've caught two people clearly slipping up, there's got to be so many more.
yeah, definitely. And I think it's a blessing that you're there in Thailand because not only you're educating the local Thais to not fall astray to the Western tactics, but you're also kind of let's say defeating the Western agenda there. So you're serving a great purpose as an educator, helping the Thai people, destroying the propaganda, helping them see through it as well, so they're not falling victim to it. So I think your presence there is a blessing.
You still there? Because I think you cut off in the last little bit.
Yeah, do you hear me?
Okay, yeah. It's just I think your presence there is, and then which
Yeah,
probably was something very.
your presence there is a blessing, brother Matt, because of
Okay.
the reasons that I listed.
Well, thanks. I just wanted to make sure you weren't, because I heard a silence. I figured it was only like a second or two, but at the last word, I got to ask. But gee, thanks. I know it's a warm and fuzzy kind of statement. So thanks. At the same time, I do want to caveat that, this is not because either the Thai people or the Cambodian people are in any way stupid, but just like with anybody, you're not going to understand other cultures as well as you do your own. Now, there are going to be plenty of things that I miss about Thai culture that the locals are picking up on immediately where I'm clueless. That's just the way things are. But at the same time, Thai people, and Cambodians are going to, unless they've spent a significant amount of time in the West, there are going to be things that they're clueless on too. And that's not stupidity on anyone's side. That's just human nature. You know what you're familiar with. And I know that's kind of common sense to you and me, but I'm saying that so nobody twists it. You dig?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think you being there, with a positive mindset and agenda, I mean, you're all helping each other, where you're learning from the Thai perspective, they're learning from you, and that's what it comes down to. We're all walking each other home. So as we approach the 1 hour mark, brother Matt, if there's anything that I feel to ask you, please take your time.
Well, um, no, not really. I mean, I think I've given a good summary. I know you had asked me where before I wanted to like wrap up, and give full analysis, if you will, full as much info as I could on this particular event. You had asked me about just where I see things going. Um, and it's hard to say. I mean, clearly things are shifting east, and that's inevitable. I mean, people are going to only put up with bullies and tyrants and that sort of thing for so long before you know you resist. Whether that resistance is just physical and martial, or whether it's economic, whether it's overt or subtle. I mean, it's going to vary, but people just aren't going to take that shit any longer. Um, so, you know, and something's got to give. Um, we hope it's peaceful, but let's face it, some of it probably ain't going to be. As Fanon put it, I think very correctly, decolonization is always a violent phenomenon. So there are going to be things that aren't pretty. At the same time, there are, like, I see America as pretty much on an inevitable collision course with something violent. Almost definitely internally to a greater or lesser degree, and probably externally as well. Now, is that the same in, say, Southeast Asia? Well, maybe not. Okay, because there are structures in place here and mindsets that allow people to get along a little better, cooperate a little better. Sure, there's still, capitalist bullshit like there is anywhere, but there's also laws and policies that do make it a little easier for people to cooperate and start their own enterprises and that sort of thing. So let me rephrase that. Start their own enterprises without a whole lot of capital to begin with, you know, um, which is kind of the key. Um, so I think that allows for growth towards a more equitable economy without violent struggle. So, is like the whole world going to be engulfed in war? Well, I doubt that, but will there be some wars? Probably. Will there be flare ups and incidences? Almost definitely. Um, but you can, I think it's up to all of us, wherever we are, to um, work for true justice and economic equity. And if you can, as Malcolm X said, by any means necessary, not by any means justified, okay, but necessary. It's beyond the right and wrong. It's about just get to the equality. Um, Now, certainly, if it is not necessary, keep it peaceful or at least nonviolent. Um, Now, some situations may cross that line. Hopefully, the earlier we work to subvert uh, wars of aggression, then the fewer of them there'll be, though. So that's what we can all work towards wherever we are.
Yeah, and I agree wholeheartedly that we all have to come together for the betterment of all mankind. It's either for all of us, or it's, the whole selective thing, as we see with how the Western white supremacy has kind of only favored itself, and while the rest of the population has kind of drowned in inequality. I think now that's coming to an end. Now you have other nations and things that are now rising up. So yeah, it's for the betterment of all. It's like in Islam, right? They tell us to become one ummah. So if all of the ummah is on the level and treated properly and equally with equity and merit, that is the future that we want to work towards. And I'm glad that you are there as my comrade in the NOR FSO in this struggle. And I just thank you for your presence, not only in Thailand, but just your presence in general, what you're doing.
Well, thanks. It's on us all to do what we can, and understand that, because I grew up with notions. I think we all did, of quote unquote world peace. But when you look at what the Western version of world peace was, it was everybody without resistance kowtowing to Western ideals and agendas. And, more and more every day, the rest of the world is basically telling the West to fuck off. Which,
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, that's what's happening with Israel, right? Where all of the even the mainstream now is denouncing it because it's no longer seen as a relevant
yeah,
institution,
and
but now as a liability.
right, and also, even though there might be certain figures who are doing it to just look good, save face, cover their ass, whatever word you want to use. I mean, even like what's his fucking Piers Morgan kind of did a switch recently. Which I mean, granted, I don't necessarily buy that he's sincere, but if the momentum is such that he has to now take that line, okay, to not look like a piece of shit, then okay, it's progress. Now, I don't want to get too hopeful because Gazans are still dying.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, and that is so. Let all those of us who, for example, are want to see this end to the Israeli massacre of Gaza and occupied Palestine. We can't be too happy with what we've done, because even with that kind of momentum shift, it's still kind of a miserable failure in terms of the death toll. But
Yeah.
me, um, we just got to keep at it until it stops somehow or other,
Yep. Yep.
by any means
Um,
necessary.
yes. And with that, I would like to conclude this podcast until Brother Matt joins us again in the future. And just thank you, Brother Matt. And inshallah, we will be back at it again